Hello, I'm Gordon Lang, editor of CameraLabs.com. I'd like to give you a brief video tour around the Olympus Zuiko Digital 12 to 60mm lens. Here it is, the 12 to 60mm. This lens is designed for use on DSLRs that conform to the 4/3 standard, and that includes models by Olympus, Panasonic and Leica. Now 4/3 bodies apply a field reduction factor of 2 times, so this lens delivers a coverage that's equivalent from 24 to 120mm. So that takes you all the way from decent wide angle to fairly respectable telephoto, and I've got some examples of how you might use that coming up later on in the video. Now this lens has a fairly fast focal ratio of f2.8 when it's zoomed out and f4 when it's zoomed in, so that makes it brighter than many zoom lenses. However, this lens, like all Olympus models, does not feature built-in image stabilization. If you want anti-shake with this lens, you'll need to mount it on a body that has built-in anti-shake, such as the E3 or the E510 or the E520. If you mount it on any other bodies which don't have built-in stabilization, then you'll just have to use a fast enough shutter speed to make sure that camera shake isn't an issue. Now the build quality of this lens is excellent. It may not be part of the Olympus Top Pro lens range. To be part of that group you need to have a fixed focal ratio throughout the range, but it's certainly very good. Indeed, we'd say it's equivalent to models like the 7 to 14mm, which is part of the Top Pro range. Now, like that lens, the 12 to 60mm is both dust and splash proof, and the focusing and zoom rings are very smooth in operation. This is what the lens looks like when it's fully zoomed out to 12mm, and now if I turn this ring here, that's what it looks like fully zoomed into 60. Now of course this may vary over time, but we've been using this lens for several months and there's been no problem with creep at all. If I just slightly turn the zoom ring here, you'll see that this lens barrel certainly isn't trying to fall back under its own weight. Now this lens also features an SWD focusing motor. That's Olympus's term for its fast and quiet focusing system. And indeed, when you've got it mounted on a body like the E3, Olympus claims that the combination will give you the world's fastest autofocusing. So let's see what that looks like in practice. That was the 12 to 60mm mounted on the E3, focusing from infinity to its closest focusing distance and back again. And as you saw, it was very quick and also very quiet. But do you need an E3 body to enjoy that level of performance? Let's see how this lens performs on the E420. Now that might have been fractionally slower than the E3, but there wasn't a great deal in it. Certainly the autofocusing on both of those Olympus bodies with this lens is very fast, and again, as you heard, also very quiet. But it's also worth mentioning the manual focusing on this lens. Most 4/3 lenses use a motor assisted feature for the manual focus. The body actually needs to be switched on before you can adjust it. Not so with the 12 to 60mm here. Whether you've got the body switched on or not, you can adjust it with a mechanical system, and that will be very familiar to those people who are used to using lenses from other manufacturers. It certainly feels very tactile in use, and you can turn this manual focusing ring without having to disengage the autofocus first. Right, that's enough of the physical characteristics of this lens. Let's see how you can use it in practice. I'm going to start with coverage, and to give you something to compare it to, I'm going to first of all show you a picture taken with the original 14 to 45mm kit lens. Here it is zoomed out to 14mm, working at an equivalent of 28mm. Now here's the 12 to 60 zoomed out to 12mm, working at an equivalent of 24, and as you can see, that's actually made quite a big difference. 24mm doesn't sound that much different to 28, but in practice it is capturing quite a considerably wider field of view. Now let's look at these lenses zoomed in. This shot here was again taken with the original 14 to 45mm kit lens, zoomed into 45mm, working at an equivalent of 90mm. And now here's the 12 to 60mm, working at 60mm, which is an equivalent of 120. And again, you can see how it's delivering a tighter field of view. So by going from here to here, it's clear that the 12 to 60mm gives you a very flexible range in practice, capturing a big wide-angle field at its shortest focal length, and also capable of zooming into quite respectable telephoto. That wide-angle coverage is invaluable when you find yourself in a situation with a very large object in front of you, and also when you simply can't step back any further. Here's a perfect example taken of a yacht on quite a narrow pier, and believe me, I really couldn't step back any further without getting pretty wet. Now if you're familiar with the Camera Labs gallery shots, you'll recognise this picture, but you'll notice that generally speaking that red sail touches almost both sides of the frame. That's when you're taking this picture with a lens that has a 28mm equivalent wide angle. But now this lens has an equivalent of 24mm, that is that bit wider, and as you can see it's managed to capture quite a lot on either side of the sail. Zoom this lens into its longest 60mm focal length and you've got yourself quite respectable telephoto capabilities, and of course that's ideal when you're taking portrait shots. This picture was taken with the 12-60 zoomed all the way in and with the aperture wide open, and as you can see it's quite effectively blurred that background. And if you are shooting in sunny conditions like these, you'll be pleased to know that the 12-60mm does come with a lens hood. Now the 12-60mm also has reasonable macro capabilities. Its closest focusing distance is in fact just 25cm, and here's a picture taken at that distance with the lens fully zoomed into 60mm. And it's actually quite a respectable close-up shot. The Olympus Zuiko Digital 12-60mm is one of the best quality zoom lenses we've ever tested at Camera Labs. The optical quality is superb, the focusing is quick and quiet, the build quality is excellent, the focal ratio is faster than most zoom lenses, and that 5 times optical range that's equivalent from 24 to 120mm is very flexible and general purpose use. So does this make it the perfect zoom lens for 4/3 owners? Well, yes and no. If you've got one of the bigger bodies, then we'd say pretty much it's definitely worth getting hold of. But if you've got one of the smaller 4/3 bodies, like the E420, I've got it mounted on here, there are a couple of issues that are worth mentioning. First of all, this lens looks pretty big when it's mounted on a body like this. It is slightly front heavy. Now this is something that you've really got to decide for yourself. So if you do own one of these smaller bodies and you're thinking of a lens like this, then do please try it in person first, because you might find it perfectly acceptable, or you might find it just a bit too big. However, there is a technical issue that will face anyone who's using this lens on a body like this, and that concerns the pop-up flash. Now if I just pop that up now and just show you that here, you can already see that if this flash goes off, this barrel is going to cause a problem. It's actually going to cast a shadow on your pictures, and the only way you're going to avoid that is by either zooming this lens in quite a lot or by using an external flash gun. And if neither of those solutions are acceptable to you, then perhaps this isn't the lens that's ideal for you if you're using one of these smaller bodies. Now it's not an issue with the E3 because its flash pops up higher, and also the flash is further away from the lens to start with. And to see exactly what I'm talking about, head on over to our full review at cameralabs.com, and there you'll see some examples taken with the flash, both with the E3 and the E420. If you do go over to cameralabs.com, also check out the results pages, because there you'll find optical results for this lens compared to other Olympus models, including kit lenses and also the 25mm pancake. So to see exactly how this lens compares to those and whether this should be the general purpose zoom lens for you if you own a 4/3 body, then head on over to our full review. You'll find it, as always, at www.cameralabs.com.